When they threw me out on the street with the words, "You're dead to us," I swore that one day they would regret it. 4 years later, I stepped off a private jet in a designer dress, holding my son in my arms, and watched their faces turn pale with shock. My name is Elizabeth, and 4 years ago, my mother-in-law, Victoria, looked me in the eye and said words that shattered my heart. A woman who can't give her husband children is an empty shell. You're not a woman, Elizabeth. You're just a pretty doll taking up space meant for a real wife. She said this while handing me a suitcase and pushing me out of the only home I'd known as a married woman. But let me tell you how it all began. I sat in Dr. Martinez's office, gripping Alexander's hand so tightly my knuckles turned white. The test results lay between us on the mahogany desk like a death sentence. Alexander's jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on the wall behind the doctor's head. "I'm so sorry," Dr. Martinez said softly. "The tests show significant fertility issues. Conceiving will be extremely difficult, though not impossible." Before I continue, I want to thank everyone who supports stories of resilience and transformation. If you believe every woman deserves a second chance to rebuild her life, please subscribe. It's free and helps us reach more women who need hope. The drive home was deathly silent, save for the hum of Alexander's BMW engine. As we pulled into the circular driveway of the family estate, I saw Victoria and Isabella through the kitchen window, their heads bent in conversation. They looked up expectantly as we walked through the door. "Well," Victoria's voice was sharp with anticipation. "What did the doctor say?" Alexander loosened his tie and poured himself a whiskey before answering. "It's more complicated than we thought." Isabella set her teacup down with a delicate clink. "What exactly does that mean?" I opened my mouth to explain, but Alexander spoke first. "Elizabeth has issues that make pregnancy unlikely." Issues? As if I were a broken appliance in need of repair. Victoria's face cycled through disappointment, frustration, and finally, something akin to disgust. "I see. Well, there are always options, aren't there? Specialists, treatments." "We'll explore every possibility," I said quietly, finding my voice. But Victoria had already turned away, rearranging flowers on the counter. The conversation was over for her, but I felt judgment settling around me like a heavy blanket. That night, Alexander and I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The silence stretched until I couldn't bear it anymore. "We'll get through this," I whispered. "There are treatments, procedures, Elizabeth." His voice was tired, detached. "Let's just see what happens." What happened was 18 months of monthly disappointments. 18 months of negative pregnancy tests I hid at the bottom of bathroom trash cans. 18 months of Victoria's increasingly venomous comments about our childless state. "My friend Eleanor's daughter just had twins," she announced one morning at breakfast. "Such a blessing. Eleanor feels so fulfilled as a grandmother." Isabella nodded eagerly. "I can't wait to have kids. I bet I'll be pregnant within 6 months of my wedding." I pushed eggs around my plate, my appetite gone. Those breakfasts became a special kind of torture, designed to remind me of my failure without saying it outright. After the 8th month, Alexander stopped attending doctor's appointments. "I have a conference call," he'd say, or "the office needs me." Always something more important than figuring out why his wife couldn't give him the family he wanted. I started going alone, sitting in waiting rooms full of pregnant women, feeling like an imposter among the truly fertile. Dr. Martinez was kind but realistic. Each treatment was more invasive, more expensive, and more likely to fail than the last. Maybe we should consider adoption, I suggested one evening as Alexander pored over business papers at the kitchen table. He didn't look up. My mother wants biological grandchildren. You know how she feels about bloodlines. Bloodlines? As if we were breeding horses instead of trying to build a family. The final straw came on a Tuesday in March. I'd been nauseous for 3 days and allowed myself the dangerous luxury of hope. I bought a pregnancy test on my way home from work and locked myself in our bathroom, hands trembling as I waited for the result. Negative. I sat on the bathroom floor and finally let myself cry. Not the quiet, dignified tears I usually allowed, but ugly, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. When I finally pulled myself together and went downstairs, I found Alexander in his study, papers spread across the desk. Divorce papers. How long have you been planning this? I asked, lifting the documents with numb fingers. Alexander finally looked up, his expression almost relieved. Elizabeth, we both know this isn't working. We want different things. We want the same thing. We want a family. I want a family that's actually possible. The prenup was attached to the divorce papers, highlighted in yellow. Every clause that protected the Harrison family wealth, every line that left me with nothing if our marriage failed. I remembered signing it 3 years ago, young, in love, and certain we'd never need it. I was 25, I said, staring at my own signature. I thought love would be enough. Love doesn't pay bills or carry on family names. Victoria appeared in the doorway, as if she'd been eavesdropping. Elizabeth, darling, I think it's best if you pack your things tonight. Isabella can drive you wherever you need to go. I looked at Alexander, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his mother she was overstepping. Instead, he gathered the papers and slid them into a folder. My lawyer will contact you about the details, he said, not meeting my eyes. I packed one suitcase that night while Victoria watched from the doorway. 3 years of marriage fit into the clothes that filled a carry-on. You're young, Victoria said as I folded my wedding dress into tissue paper. You'll find someone else, someone better suited to your limitations. Isabella appeared with my coat and purse. The taxi's here. I walked through the house one last time, past the dining room where I'd hosted dinner parties, past the living room where I'd spent countless evenings feeling like an outsider. Alexander was nowhere to be seen. At the front door, Victoria handed me the suitcase and $30 from her purse. For the taxi, she said. You'll understand someday. A woman who can't give her husband children is incomplete. Alexander deserves better. I climbed into the taxi with no idea of my destination, no idea how I'd survive. As we pulled away from the estate, I pressed my face to the window and watched the only life I'd known disappear behind perfectly manicured hedges. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror. Where to, miss? I had no answer. I had no home, no money, no plan. But as we drove through the city, something hard and determined began to form in my chest. They'd thrown me out like garbage, discarded me as worthless. They had no idea what they'd just set free. The taxi dropped me at a motel on the edge of downtown. $50 for 3 nights in a room that smelled of cigarettes and broken dreams. I sat on the scratchy bedspread and stared at my suitcase, wondering how my life had been reduced to a single bag. The next morning, I walked into Martinez's dry cleaning with my only business suit and asked for a job. The owner, Mrs. Martinez, gave me a weary once-over. "Ever worked retail before?" I lied. "Yes." She handed me an apron that had seen better days. $6 an hour, cash only. Start now. The first customer handed me a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent at Alexander's house. My hands shook as I hung it on the rack, remembering how I used to organize entire wardrobes full of such things. The customer barely looked at me, treating me like part of the machinery. During my break, I locked myself in the tiny employee bathroom and sobbed into a paper towel. But when the customer bell rang, I wiped my face and smiled like nothing had happened. That night, I found a studio apartment for $400 a month. The landlord, Mr. Chen, was skeptical about my lack of references until I offered 2 months' rent up front in cash. The apartment had a leaky faucet, a window that wouldn't close properly, and a radiator that rattled all night. But it was mine. I bought a mattress from a thrift store and dragged it up 3 flights of stairs myself. The previous tenant had left a dented kettle and a single fork. I ate instant noodles for dinner, sitting cross-legged on the floor, telling myself this was temporary. But temporary stretched into weeks, then months. The dry cleaners barely covered rent and food. Some nights, I went to bed hungry to avoid spending my last dollars. I told myself stories in the dark, imagining what I'd say to Victoria if I ever saw her again. "You're not done yet," I whispered to the cracked ceiling. "They don't get the last word." Mrs. Martinez noticed I never took sick days and always stayed late to help with bookkeeping. "You're too smart for this place," she told me one night as we closed up. "Why are you here?" I couldn't tell her about Alexander, the prenup, or being thrown out like trash, so I just said, "Starting over." She nodded like she understood and slipped me an extra $20 for groceries. 3 months later, I saw a hiring ad for Reader's Nook bookstore. The owner, an older woman named Helen, hired me for morning shifts after I proved I could alphabetize books faster than her current employee. Another $6 an hour, plus I could read during slow periods. But 6 plus 6 still wasn't enough. I found evening work cleaning office buildings downtown. The cleaning company didn't ask questions, just handed me keys and pointed to the supply closets. I worked until midnight, scrubbing toilets and emptying trash, then caught a few hours of sleep before my bookstore shift. On weekends, I picked up catering gigs through a temp agency, serving champagne to people who looked just like Alexander's friends. People who didn't see me, even when I stood right in front of them. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was invisible to the same social class that once claimed me as their own. One Saturday, I was catering a corporate event when I overheard 2 women discussing their nannies' salaries. They complained about paying $900 a week for childcare. I bit my tongue and refilled their wine glasses, calculating that they spent more on a nanny than I earned in a month. The juggling nearly broke me. I fell asleep standing in the bookstore, waking with bookspine imprints on my cheek. Helen started leaving me energy bars and coffee, saying nothing. Those small acts of kindness kept me going when everything else felt impossible. My luck changed on a Tuesday morning when I spilled coffee on myself rushing between jobs. I ducked into a corner deli to clean up and bumped into a man poring over spreadsheets at a back table. "Elizabeth? Elizabeth Mitchell?" I looked up, startled that anyone remembered my maiden name. The man was in his 50s, with kind eyes and graying temples. It took me a moment to place him. Raj Patel. I couldn't believe it. From Maple Street. He stood, grinning broadly. I thought that was you. What are the odds? Raj had lived 3 houses down from my childhood home. His mother, Mrs. Patel, used to give me homemade samosas when I passed their garden. I remembered the day she fell on their porch. I was 16 and helped her inside, staying until Raj got home from college. You helped my mom that day she fell, he said, as if reading my thoughts. She never forgot that kindness. We talked for 20 minutes. He now owned a small logistics company built from scratch after immigrating 15 years ago. When I mentioned I was between opportunities, his expression turned thoughtful. I'm looking for an operations manager, someone who can handle details, deal with difficult people, think fast. The pay's decent and there's room to grow. I nearly laughed. Raj, I work at a dry cleaner and a bookstore. I clean offices at night. I don't know anything about logistics. But you know about people. You know about hard work, and you know about starting over. He handed me a business card. Come in Monday morning. Let's see what you can do. That weekend, I studied everything I could about logistics and supply chain management. I borrowed business books from Helen and read until my eyes burned. On Monday morning, I walked into Patel Logistics in my only professional outfit, the same one I'd worn to the dry cleaner 6 months earlier. The office was small but organized, with 3 employees handling client accounts. Raj introduced me to the team and gave me a desk by the window. For the first time in months, I had a place that felt like it could be something. Start with these client files, he said, handing me a stack of folders. Review the invoices. Figure out where we can improve efficiency. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I dove into the work with desperate determination. Every report I wrote, every client call, every process I streamlined felt like proof that I was more than what Victoria called me, more than a barren woman, more than a failure. The other employees, Maria and David, were skeptical of the boss's new hire at first. But when I reorganized the filing system and created a tracking spreadsheet that saved them hours each week, they started coming to me with questions and ideas. For the first time since leaving Alexander's house, I felt useful, valued, like I might actually have a future that didn't revolve around counting change for groceries. 3 months in, Raj called me into his office. You've increased our efficiency by 30%, he said, sliding an envelope across the desk. This is your new salary. The number inside made my hands shake. It was more than I'd earned at all 3 of my previous jobs combined. 6 months into my job at Patel Logistics, I was eating lunch at my desk when Maria mentioned her side investments in cryptocurrency. Made $400 last month just sitting on my phone, she said casually, scrolling through charts. Something clicked. I'd been so focused on surviving paycheck to paycheck that I'd never considered making my money work for me. That night, I signed up for an online finance course and spent my first Saturday in months doing something other than laundry and grocery shopping. The instructor, a woman named Dr. Angela Chen, talked about compound interest like it was magic. Your money should have babies, she said in one video lecture. And those babies should have babies. I started small, investing $75 from each paycheck into index funds. Then I discovered a business strategy course taught by a venture capitalist who'd built 3 companies from nothing. The difference between the rich and everyone else, he explained, is not how much they earn, but how much they keep and grow. I started seeing everything differently. When Raj mentioned losing a major client due to poor communication, I didn't just fix the immediate issue. I designed an entire client retention system. "Where'd you learn all this?" Raj asked after I streamlined our entire billing process. "YouTube University," I said, only half joking. My first real breakthrough came when I noticed patterns in our shipping data. Certain routes consistently ran over budget while others stayed under. I spent 2 weeks building a predictive model and presented it to Raj on a Tuesday morning. "This could save us $50,000 a year," he said, staring at my spreadsheets. "Elizabeth, this is brilliant." That day he handed me an envelope with a $7,000 bonus. I stared at the check for a full minute before carefully tucking it into my wallet. Instead of spending it on furniture or a vacation, I researched emerging tech companies. There was this startup called Ecotech Solutions, developing software to improve solar panel efficiency. The risk made my stomach clench. Losing $7,000 would set me back months, but something about their business model felt right. I bought shares on a Wednesday morning, hands shaking as I clicked Confirm Purchase. 3 months later, Ecotech announced a partnership with a major energy company. My investment doubled overnight. By my first anniversary at Patel Logistics, my portfolio was worth $35,000. "You look different," Maria remarked one morning. "More confident or something." She was right. I'd stopped checking my bank account with dread and started checking my investment app with anticipation. The real turning point came when I discovered angel investor networks, groups of accredited investors pooling money to fund early-stage companies. The minimum investment was $25,000, nearly my entire portfolio. I studied every startup in their portfolio, read market forecasts until 2 a.m., analyzed founding teams. I settled on a startup called Future Med Solutions, a company developing AI for early cancer detection. There was something painfully ironic about me. A woman deemed broken for fertility issues, investing in technology that could save lives. I invested $25,000 on a Friday the 13th, a date others might consider unlucky. But for me, it was the start of something bigger. A year after my angel investment, Future Med Solutions announced a breakthrough. Their AI system detected a specific type of breast cancer with 85% greater accuracy than traditional methods. My $25,000 turned into $200,000 in a single week. I sat in my still modest apartment, staring at the numbers on my phone screen, and for the first time since being thrown out of the Harrison house, I let myself dream bigger. Raj noticed my newfound confidence. "Elizabeth, I think you're ready for more. Want to be my partner?" He offered me a 30% stake in Patel Logistics for $100,000. The company was steadily profitable, and with my improvements, its value had grown by 200%. I agreed, but with a condition. "I want to expand our services, add supply chain consulting, build a strategic planning division." Raj grinned. "That's exactly why I want you as a partner. You see opportunities where others see only problems." By my 3rd year at Patel Logistics, our company had grown to 25 employees. My stake and dividends were worth $500,000. But the real breakthrough came when I met Elena Rodriguez at a Women Entrepreneurs Conference. She was an app developer who'd created a platform connecting female freelancers with small businesses. "I need an investor who gets what it's like to start from nothing," she said over coffee after her pitch. I saw myself in her 4 years ago, talented, determined, but underestimated. I invested $150,000 in her company, Connecta. 18 months later, Connecta was acquired by Microsoft for $15 million. My share netted me $2.5 million. I officially became a millionaire on a Wednesday, September 15th, 2023, sitting in the same cafe where I'd met Raj 4 years earlier. With my new financial status came a new life. I moved into a beautiful downtown apartment with a river view, bought a car without counting pennies. But most importantly, I felt ready for new possibilities. That's when I met David Sinclair at a charity event for an infertility organization. He was a reproductive endocrinologist who dedicated his career to helping couples facing the same struggles I had. "A lot of my patients feel broken," he said as we stood by a window overlooking the city skyline. "But infertility doesn't define their worth as people." His words touched something deep inside me. We talked all night, and I told someone my full story for the first time. My marriage, the divorce, the years of struggle. "You're not broken," he said when I finished. "You were just with people who couldn't see your true value." A year into my relationship with David, I felt that familiar nausea. But this time, when I took a pregnancy test, 2 lines appeared. I was pregnant. Dr. Martinez, the same doctor who'd given me a grim prognosis 6 years earlier, shook his head in amazement. "Sometimes the body is just ready at the right time," he said. "Stress, age, emotional state, it can all affect fertility." I placed a hand on my stomach, hardly believing it was real. All those years, I thought I was broken, defective, incomplete. But maybe I just hadn't been ready. Maybe I'd been with the wrong people at the wrong time. When my son Emilio was born, I knew it was time to close that chapter of my life. I wanted Victoria, Alexander, and Isabella to know their judgment was wrong, not out of revenge, but for my own need for closure. I hired a private investigator who easily tracked down the Harrisons. They still lived in the same mansion, though according to the report, things weren't going so well. The family business was losing money due to Alexander's poor investments. On the day I chose to visit, I wore a designer dress that cost more than my annual dry cleaning salary. I arrived on a private jet I'd chartered for the weekend, with my beautiful son in my arms. When I rang the familiar doorbell, my heart pounded so loudly I was sure the whole street could hear it. Isabella opened the door, her expression shifting from annoyance to recognition to pure shock. "Mom!" she shouted through the house. "You'd better get out here!" Victoria appeared in the foyer, and when she saw me, her face turned so pale I thought she might faint. "Hello, Victoria," I said calmly, rocking Emilio in my arms. "Guess I wasn't as broken as you thought." Alexander came down the stairs, papers in hand, even now, working from home. When he saw me, the papers slipped from his hands and scattered across the marble floor. "Elizabeth?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Surprise," I said, smiling. "I thought you might like to meet your grandson." The next few minutes were pure silence. I stood in the house that was once my home, holding a child who was never supposed to exist by their verdict. "How?" Victoria began, but the words wouldn't come. "How did I have a child? How can I afford this dress? How did I arrive on a private jet?" I smiled softly. "It's a long story, but the short version is that you were wrong about everything." I spent the next hour telling them about my journey, the dry cleaner, the cleaning job, building my life from nothing, my investments, the company, meeting David. I scrubbed offices for people who earned more in an hour than I did in a week, I said. But you know what? It taught me the value of money, the value of hard work. It taught me I could survive anywhere, become anyone. Alexander listened silently, his face cycling through emotions. "Elizabeth, he began, but I raised a hand. "You don't need to say anything, Alexander. I didn't come here for apologies. I came to say thank you." That caught them off guard. "Thank you for throwing me out. Thank you for forcing me to find my own strength. If you hadn't, I'd never have known what I was capable of." My son made a small noise, and I looked down at him with a smile. "His name is Emilio," I said. "And he'll grow up knowing he's worthy of love no matter what he can or cannot give others." As I prepared to leave, Victoria finally spoke. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "I was cruel. I said things I shouldn't have." I turned to her, and for the first time, I saw something like remorse on her face. "You know, Victoria, your words nearly broke me once. But now I see they said more about you than they did about me." I headed for the door, then paused. "By the way, if you ever realize the family business needs a new investment partner, my office is open for talks. I'm always looking to help families right their wrongs." As I climbed into the car that would take me to the airport, I felt the weight I'd carried for years finally lift from my shoulders. I drove past the house one last time, knowing I'd never return. But this time, I wasn't leaving as a broken woman with a single suitcase. I was leaving as a mother, an entrepreneur, and a millionaire who'd built her life from ashes. My son slept in my arms, his breathing calm and steady. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "We're free." Today, 2 years later, I run an investment fund specializing in startups founded by women. I'm married to David, and we're expecting our second child. Sometimes I think about what 25-year-old Elizabeth would say if she knew what she'd have to go through to find herself. I think she'd be terrified of the pain, but inspired by the strength. I still live in the same city, driving past Martinez's dry cleaning every week. I stopped by recently to thank him for giving me a chance when no one else would. He smiled and said, "I knew you were special from day one. It just took the world a while to notice." It's a good reminder. Sometimes the world can't see who we really are right away, but that doesn't mean we stop being ourselves. My story isn't about revenge. It's about transformation. It's about finding your worth when everyone around you says you're worthless. If you're reading this and feel broken, rejected, or unworthy, know that your story isn't over. Your most beautiful chapters might still be ahead. And remember, those who cast you out don't get to define your worth. Only you hold that power. Did you like the story? Write your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next interesting story. See you tomorrow.